folks, we're going to, here in the zendo, we're just going to do a little chant. And you're welcome to kind of join along if you want, or not as you wish. Buddham saranam gacchami, Dhammam saranam gacchami, Sangham saranam gacchami, Buddham saranam gacchami, Dhammam saranam gacchami, Sangham saranam gacchami, Buddham saranam gacchami, Dhammam saranam gacchami, Sangham saranam gacchami. Wow. So here we are on the first morning of this 6-day adventure. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry. Folks, on the back wall, by all means come out. Put yourselves out so I can see you. And you too, Vanna, if you want. Yeah, by all means, yeah. Just a little readjustment here. We haven't done this in a long time. Some of us gathered. So we've got during the lockdown we made some changes in the zendo. We got some new gear, and so it's brand new for me, for all of us. And thank you so much. So just bear with us as we're sort of finding our way. I mean, I suppose especially me, as I'm finding my way, because this is only the second time I've done a talk out of this room. The last time was maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, where there was just a small number of people. You can go out if you like, Peg. Feel free. Okay. To a Zoom group of practitioners as well. I know sort of early on in lockdown, a lot of sort of organizations like ours that were used to doing in-person stuff and then found themselves doing Zoom stuff kind of had this assumption that, down the road when necessary, we can do hybrid. We can do our in-person stuff and we can do Zoom at the same time, assuming it would just be a breeze. But there's actually been a lot of reports already in multiple kinds of organizations that it's not that easy, it's not that straightforward. So I'm finding my way how to communicate with these wonderful folks in the room with me, but not forget you folks on Zoom and the door, what do we call it? The wall-less zendo, the zendo without walls, and also how to communicate with you guys and not forget these guys, It's sort of, I think it's going to work just fine, actually, but it's a little bit unusual, so well, it's more than unusual. It's like like I said, I did it once a few weeks ago. So let's see. Okay, just a reminder, this is a session, meaning an opportunity, gathering together in order to encounter the heart, or touch the heart, find the heart of us, which turns out to be the heart of all. But it's fine enough if we kind of just get clearer about our own heart and how to rest with it and be with it. And yet, that might be what I was talking about as the first phase of the journey. And it turns out there is this mind-blowing second phase where we discover that our own heart, the core of our being, actually isn't an isolated thing within this skin bag. It seems very, very hard to believe that. Nothing in our ordinary experience and thinking would incline us to accept that as a proposition. And it's not really meant as a proposition, actually. It's meant as a little sign, a little flag waving from that reality. So it's not really of interest as an idea. It's just a message from that reality. There's one great Zen master, Yunmen or Unmon. He was thought to have rather a kind of lofty, austere, hard-to-reach teaching, which was likened to a red flag high up on a mountainside. That's how how he was calling from afar. From his point of view, it didn't seem afar at all, because everything's right here when we're clear about that. But when we're not clear about it, it's like, well, what are they talking about? So it's like a red flag far up on a cliff face, actually, is what they said. It's an invitation, really. So, I'm just going to pull out my notes, try not to disregard them as I usually do. And actually, I want to start with a very nice, more than nice, a sort of important message that came through somehow appeared on my phone, I think in email or something, from my own master Ruben Habito Roshi, which he had, I think, shared or reposted from a Jesuit father called James Martin. And it's actually, basically, it's mostly a quote from Dorothy Day, the great Catholic social worker, who says this. This is Dorothy Day being quoted as I understand it. What we would like to do is change the world. Make it a little simpler for people to feed, clothe, and shelter themselves as God intended them to do, or we could say as nature intended them to do. And by fighting for better conditions, by crying out unceasingly for the rights of the workers, the poor, of the destitute, the rights of the worthy and the unworthy poor, in other words, we can, to a certain extent, change the world. We can work for the oasis, the little cell of joy and peace in a harried world. We can throw our pebble in the pond and be confident that its ever-widening circle will reach around the world. We repeat, there is nothing we can do but love, and dear God, please enlarge our hearts to love each other, to love our neighbor, to love our enemy as our friend. Well, maybe that's something like we're trying to do. Work for the oasis, the little cell of joy and peace in a harried world. That by creating a little cell of joy and peace in our zendo without walls, it may be like a pond thrown into like a pebble thrown into the pond of the world, sending out its ripples. So let us please remember the poor, the sick, the dying, the grieving, the unemployed, those unable to pay rent this week, the homeless, those persecuted simply because of their race, gender, sexual orientation, creed, or nationality, the unjustly imprisoned, the refugee, and the immigrant. To dismiss the image of God in anyone is a complete denial of the incarnation. Let me translate that, if I may. To dismiss Buddha nature in anyone is a complete denial of the Dharma nature that we're all discovering here. Those last words were of Father James Martin, S.J., Society of Jesuits. So let's just take just sort of a moment to pause and reflect that why do we do this practice? It's so easy to think of it as a solitary pursuit, basically. Going to the gym to get fit, going to the meditation cushion to, in whatever ways we understand it, get clearer. But if we think that that is done in some kind of isolated way, we're really missing what Zen is all about. One of the, I think it's fair to say, almost sort of peculiarities of Zen in the whole watershed of Buddhist streams, is that it doesn't really see the teaching as pertaining to, how can I put it, sort of a private self-development kind of thing. There's certain ways in which, I don't know if it's really fair to say, but you could maybe say that more of some other Buddhist traditions, which are most venerated and rightly, and they in turn have their own way of creating a much happier world, a world peopled by clearer denizens whose hearts are more open, whose minds are clearer, who are less driven by the three poisons. So it all works out the same way in the end, I think. But Zen has this I want to call it almost an oddity about it, that the teaching, especially if you're in the style of Zen interested in the koans, the teaching is not really coming from sort of mind development instructions. It's coming from the world in which we live. It's the actual teaching is the world in which we live. Some of you are familiar with some of my talks have heard me say this before, but if you look at the first classic collection of koans that we study in our koan way, it's the Gateless Gate. And you look at what do they consist of. The first koan's about a dog, the second koan's about a fox, the third koan is about a finger, the fourth koan is about a beard, the fifth koan is about a tree, the sixth koan is about a flower, the seventh koan is about bowls and doing the washing up, the eighth koan is about a cart. And then finally you get in the ninth koan, somebody's sitting, somebody's actually sitting and meditating. But basically, where our teacher is, for example, right now, I'm looking at the altar. I wish you could see it. We got this amazing bunch of flowers. Margie, I'm sure, once again, to thank for that. That's the teacher. Actually, the floor here, this beautiful old, partially mud floor, has got this soft sheen on it. Variegated, multiple shades, really, with little bright bits and softer bits, this morning sheen here in northern New Mexico, in the mountains. Soft light, because it's a slightly cloudy day, a little bit blustery, darker clouds, lighter clouds moving outside. The floor of the zendo has got a soft sheen. That's the teaching. That is the teaching. What's it teaching? It's teaching something about phase 2, well, phase 1 as well of the journey. Phase 1, coming back, noticing, appreciating, finding that when we're still, we join a world of silence and stillness that's beautiful. And that touches our hearts, and our hearts start to crumble and tenderize and soften and maybe even open a little bit, open to the world. And then maybe more than that, this second phase starts to creep in. What this experience of looking at the floor with its sheen. Yeah, I assume, I've always assumed that I'm in here somewhere, a witness, an observer looking at it. But here we have a chance to study that, to examine, investigate that proposition, that way of construing reality. Is it in fact the case? This self, who I assume is the receiver of experience, to some extent the agent, so struggling to be an agent of navigation, is it actually true? What is this self that I take for granted? Well, we have, amazingly, we've got these koans. I mean, by no means the only tradition that has sort of similar things, many traditions, somewhat similar things, that we've got these koans that help us actually investigate that. I'm going to just say a tiny bit on koans that, they seem like, that they too seems like something we think about, something we take into our meditation, and that, it's sort of me with a koan. But the whole thing with a koan really is that when it comes to life, when the koan starts to live, and so it's no longer about words, it's about a living reality. At that point, we sort of have to, what the real sort of the way that they come to life is by our letting them dissolve that construction that I'm somewhere in here aware of the koan. There's me and there's mu, for example. But actually, I mean, we don't know this when we're sitting with the koan, but actually, that koan is, what it's doing is calling forth somehow within us, within our very consciousness, this reality that I am not, in fact, here looking at, studying, sitting with mu, if mu is our koan. In fact, when we discover what mu is, really, that construction breaks down. That me and mu are not two things. And that's the treasure of the koans. That they're sort of, they're little puzzles, enigmas, riddles, seeming like that, until somehow we let them do their work and show us what they really are. And they're just a gateway. They're a key that unlocks a door. They're a swinging door, I would say. They're just, we didn't know it could swing open. We didn't know it was a door, but it is a door, kind of. Swings open. And we discover this indivisible reality. Maybe we can call it a sort of level of our consciousness, or a level of our experience, or a sort of dimension of our experience, where there is no division, there is no separation. Inseparability, Dogen, 13th century master, sometimes said, inseparability. Okay, so I wanted to bring in mu because I know, or at least I believe a fair number of you may be sitting with mu. Just kind of getting through my papers here. Okay, so let me just say a couple of things actually about this process again, this retreat. I would encourage you to just kind of allow for turbulence, allow for finding it hard, wondering what on earth you're doing, why on earth you're doing it, and how long is this thing going to go on, and what have I got myself into? I'd make allowance for those kinds of feelings and thoughts to come up. And assume that they will, and assume that that's just normal and natural and okay. But what to do when they're intense and it's really uncomfortable? So I want to just give us a couple of little sort of pointers on that area. Sort of obstacles, things that come up, making it hard to be still, and with the sort of the kind of implicit awareness of, oh no, not another 6 days of this kind of thing. First of all, like I said, it's a journey, so we just don't know what's around the next bend always, and the more we can just trust it, the more we can just be with how it is and not be too concerned. Like I think I said last night, thing about the weather is, if you don't like it, just wait a bit. Okay? That can be really hard when it's stormy and thunder's crackling and there's lightning bolts all around. You think, get me out of here, get me out of here. It will change. It will change. And the more that we can approach that kind of turbulence, not in the spirit of, I got to fix this. No, not that. Patience. Finding that it is actually possible to allow our experience to be as it is. I'm going to read you a little bit on this point from a non-dual teacher, Amoda Ma, got a book called Falling Open in a World Falling Apart. She says, when trying, let me start a little. She says, I'm talking, she's talking here about surrender, actually, which is a little allied with allowing. It's not maybe exactly the same, but close. She says, the question of how to surrender, trying to do practice, trying to meditate, trying to be mindful, trying to open, trying to accept. When trying exhausts itself, the possibility of surrender comes to the forefront. And then the question arises, how to surrender? Right? We could almost say, change it to how to allow. But this question comes from the wrong place. It's not a matter of how it can be done. There's no formula for the mind. The mind cannot do it or understand it. When a circumstance is challenging, when life rocks our world, when there's loss or pain, surrender becomes impossible because the mind doesn't want to surrender to a circumstance and to an experience that it really doesn't want, including sitting still for an extended period of time. It's more useful to turn your attention to tenderness. Tenderness is the same as surrender. It's not about having loving thoughts or sending thoughts of compassion toward that which is the cause of your pain and suffering. It's not about using the mind to practice tenderness or do tenderness. Tenderness is what remains. Tenderness is what remains when you stop giving attention to the narratives in your mind. When something happens in your life and you experience a feeling you don't like, e.g., fourth period on the first day or whatever, and it's like, oh no, what have I got myself into? When something happens and you experience a feeling you don't like, the habitual tendency is to wrap a whole bunch of narratives around that experience. This shouldn't be happening. I shouldn't be feeling this. They shouldn't have done that, and so on. These narratives create resistance. They create a clenched fist. They create the suffering. When you stop giving attention to the narratives, so in others, not then saying, I shouldn't even have these narratives. When you stop giving attention to them, what remains is a kind of quietness. It's a space, a softness. It's not a weakness, but an openness. Tenderness is the openness of an inner silence. This silence can't be created by the mind and its attempts to change experience. It can't be created by having positive thoughts or loving thoughts. Silence has nothing to do with thinking, because whether the mind engages in positive thinking or negative thinking, it's still producing a narrative. It's still mounting an attempt to try and fix something. Tenderness is what remains when there's no attempt to fix anything. She goes on, I'm not suggesting you avoid tending to circumstances that require your care and attention. I'm talking about your inner experience in response to circumstances, which is where the suffering is. The suffering is not in what happens, but in how you respond to what happens. So, the surrender, she says, it doesn't necessarily mean the comfort goes away. True surrender is falling into a deeper place within yourself, regardless of what you're feeling. It's allowing what is, allowing what is. So let's have that as a go-to, when we're having a hard time. Just remember, the wise ones like Amodhama, they say, allow. I was trying to kind of maybe convey a bit of that earlier in the guided sit, like, let's not try to push things away. Let's find that there's a capacity we have here and now for allowing. And a kind of PS that sometimes it's really hard to find that capacity for allowing. And what do we do then? They're saying, hey, just allow. Well, it sounds nice, but I don't know how to allow. Well, right then, what we do is allow that. We allow that we don't know how to allow right now. Okay? We may have to just say it to ourselves. Right now, I don't know how to do allowing. But, just in recognizing that, isn't there just a little tiny hem, fringe around the experience that is allowing? Just in recognizing it and stating it. That this is how it is. I can't allow right now. And can you feel how even just saying those words to yourself brings in a kind of tenderness? That we're not forcing our will on our practice. Instead, we're discovering that there's a kind of, even just a little hint of, so be it right now. Just a little bit of that is enough to make a tiny little difference. And that tiny little difference makes all the difference. It makes just enough difference. Okay, so hope that's a little kind of guideline, a little handhold, a little watchword for the retreat. For now, I mean, there'll be more coming along, I hope, as we go. But that's one for now. Recognize, can I allow how it is or not? Just recognize that if you're encountering turbulence. We will pass through it. It will pass. But sometimes it doesn't feel like that. So then see if you can allow and recognize if right now I can't allow this is an appropriate statement of recognition. Okay, now of course you may, some of you, already be sliding into the great ocean, floating along across the waves in your little boat of mu, or maybe some other koan, or maybe no koan. Fine. No need then. But the need will come sooner or later, again, for all of us. Okay, now, excuse me, how am I doing for time? Oh boy, not so good. Well, I don't know what I'm going to do, because I wanted to talk about mu. What's that? Yeah, but I don't want to overdo it. Let's see. This is... Is it okay if I talk a little bit more? I don't know, you poor folks. And I mean, okay. I'm seeing some thumbs up, but not many. Just a few thumbs up. Oh man, well please move around. Okay, big thumbs up there. Thank you from Martin. Look, Mark, if you want to move, adjust, do so. I'm going to do so. Okay, so here we go. A monk asked Joshu, a nun asked Joshu, does a dog have Buddha nature? Joshu answered, mu. Does a dog have Buddha nature? Mu. First koan of the Gateless Gate. Mumon Wumen, who compiled the Gateless Gate in 1228 in China, he said, all you got to do in Zen is pass the one barrier set up by the ancestors. Pass this, through this Gateless Gate. And here's how you do it with mu. Mu itself is the Gateless Gate. Practice with mu is the way to pass through the Gateless Gate. But I got to tell you, I recently heard a talk by international Samba Zen abbot Yamada Ryoen Roshi, in which he commented on this comment by Wu Men about mu, and said, really? Really? The ancestors set up a barrier? No, we set up a barrier. The boundless world of Buddha nature, and we're going to come to that term, Buddha nature, shortly. The boundless reality of Buddha nature has no barriers. It's nonsense. No, ancestors didn't set up any kind of barrier. Rubbish. But we did. we have done. We have had this secret little gate. This little gate within us that says it's a gate between me and the world. It's a gate that is a wraparound gate, not just normal gate, but a circular, spherical gate all around me. That's what me means. It means I'm separate. If you sort of take away the separateness, it doesn't really mean anything. The whole point of the separate self is that it's separate. And that's the barrier. And Mu is the means, is one of 84,000 means, but it's a revered means in this tradition of opening the gate. And it's sort of like it does it, not us. How do we sort of encourage it to do it? By sitting with it. By just, almost I'd say, mindlessly mooing. Every out-breath, moo. It seems like a crazy practice. Moo. That's all we do. Now, how am I going to do this? I want to give a bit of background. There's deep background to this. Deep, deep background. Way back, for example, in the 7th century, in India, they were already talking about something a little bit like this. Here's the Chandogya Upanishad, a Vedantic text, a sort of premier text of the Vedanta, where the Udgatar priests began their chanting with a meditation on the one syllable Om. Sound had always been divine in India. I'm quoting from Karen Armstrong. It was the primal reality, because it was said everything else derived from it. The Chandogya Upanishad made this single syllable stand for all sound and for the entire cosmos. Om was the essence of everything that existed, of the sun, moon, and stars. It was the Brahman, or the God, in form of sound, the vital power that held everything together. Quote, as all leaves are held together by a stalk, or perhaps a trunk, so all speech is held together by Om. Verily, the whole world is nothing but Om. That Om sort of pervades everything. Now that's a little bit like Mu. What is it? 2,000 years later or something. Mu is the boundless nature that pervades everything. And Mu is also the means to discover that. Folks, I'm actually, you know what? I'm not going to persecute you with an excessively long talk on the first day. So we're going to kind of wind up. I'm going to kind of wind up right about now, because everything else I want to say, it needs a fresh talk. So Mu, if you're sitting with Mu, you don't really need to know this stuff anyway. You just sit with it. You just float it down the exhale as often as you can. And there'll be times of course, you get lost in thought and you don't do it. Great, because when you recognize you've been doing that, you've already come back. So fantastic. Now, I say this because sometimes people get sort of frustrated if they're practicing with Mu, because of course our minds will be restless and jump around at times. It's quite natural. and there's this great invitation of this, Henry's just been talking about this great gate that can swing wide, and I'll have a cosmic experience, and how amazing, and all I got to do is sit with this little sound mu, and I keep, I've got the opportunity of a lifetime. It's a retreat, and I'm supposed to sit with mu, but my mind keeps jumping to the shopping list and to, when we're getting that car serviced or whatever else, darn, damn you, mind, why won't you obey, and so we got to be really, really careful here. That, let me just sort of say in a sense, mu, yeah, it's a practice, it's a thing we're sitting with, but it's also already here totally. So don't worry about it so much. Let's just, gently do it the best we can, if that's what we're doing. We're just sort of, in ways we don't know, starting to dissolve and soften and be opening up to the great ocean we're already in, that is mu. One last quote. Ding, ding, ding. This is about Buddha nature from a Prajnaparamita Sutra, which was a great set of sutras, actually. There's lots of them from the approximately 1st to 3rd centuries CE. Is saying even powerful and dangerous structures such as selfish passions, which our teaching advises human beings to renounce or destroy, they are themselves fluid, open and transparent, inherently empty of self-existence. In other words, they are themselves Buddha nature. Buddha nature is not a thing. It's this empty reality, inherently empty of self-existence. So when we're tormented by thoughts and feelings and frustrations and impatience and feelings of sort of worthlessness, and I'll never make it, and damn, why am I no good at this, and why am I no good at life, and whatever it may be, those very thoughts, they are simply this Buddha nature, this mu, that Joshu said, doing a little dance. So not to be so concerned about it. Yeah, not to deny that they can be very painful at times. But rather than trying to fix it, letting it be, and maybe we'll get just a little glimpse that all of that turbulence, when it comes, is actually like a wind, sort of dance of the wind. It's not really made of anything quite as solid as it may seem. It is, in fact, in these words, fluid, open, transparent, inherently empty of self-existence. Inherently empty. It can oddly even sometimes seem like a kind of beautiful dance, a treasurable dance. The very emotional difficulty, turmoil that we thought we had to expunge, grow beyond, eradicate, can turn out to be its very self. It can turn out to be that wondrous swinging door, if we just let it, really let it be. Okay, so we'll hit pause, and part 2 of this talk is to come. Okay, so a lot of thanks for your patience, a lot of wishing well on this voyage. May we all fare well. May we have fair seas and favorable winds, but I'm afraid we won't. We'll run into storms, and let's all be ready for that. And sometimes we're not. We just shipwreck. Hell, that just happens. No worries. No worries. We hit a shoal. Boom. Vessel breaks. We're stranded. It's okay. It's okay. Somehow help comes. Rebuild. Launch again. It's okay. It's okay. That's how it goes. Okay. So onward. More to come. Thank you. See you soon.